What's up, everybody? This is Theology in the Dirt. Welcome. We're glad you're with us. We want to practice our theology in the public square of our homes, our city, and our world. You can get our podcast. You can get all the good stuff, sermon notes from sermons at our church, other blogs at theologyinthedirt.com. My name is Mitchell Jolly.
And I'm Chris Hayes.
What is good, my man? What's going on?
Dude, man, church is good. I just love our church, bro. Like, I love our people. Good. Like, they show up every week hungry to learn from the Word. They're reading their Bibles, active in ministries and radical life groups.
You mean acting like Christians?
I know, right? But it's like real. It's not, that's genuine.
It is.
They're encouraging. They pray. They support. Man. They ask good questions, wanting to learn and grow.
Yeah, man.
And we're not perfect by any means. That's not to say, but it's just things are good right now, and people are wanting to come and be a part of what God's doing in and through us. Not because of anything special about us as individuals, but just I just feel like the Lord's just blessing what's happened. He blesses obedience, and when people just want to follow after Him. Yeah, and man, that's what's good right now.
That's awesome. That's true, because the Lord really did, even through hard stuff that we've had to tackle as a fellowship. God has been gracious to us and increased us in spite of. And so that, I mean, that's just testimony to God's power and grace. And so, yeah, man, that's good stuff, dude. I was going to say it, man. This is what's good for me. A couple things that I love is, like, as I follow what's happening with Israel, like, I'm becoming more and more enamored by, and I don't know why I haven't paid attention to this before, but dealing with anti-Semitism. There's a reality to anti-Semitism that since the inception of Israel as a people, with the Lord calling out Abraham and promising to make him a great nation for the missionary purpose of all nations being reached with the good news, man, people have hated Jews. And so I'm watching this play out and realizing that even in Rafah, as the IDF is continuing to try to prosecute a war against people who attacked them, and I know a lot of innocent people have died, but and so I don't want to wink an eye at that, but I'm reading an article today where they have uncovered tunnels in Rafah under just about every apartment complex and home, inter-networking for terrorist activity. And I'm thinking, man, the billions of dollars that have been spent internationally for a place for Gaza, and it's, rather than being used to build a cohesive, globally connected government, they have used it for the propagation of terrorism. And the fact that it's being uncovered is good. Yeah, it's good. It's good for the people. It's good for Palestinians, because they need to be taken care of appropriately, and their government has used and abused them for terrorist purposes. So good that that's being uncovered and dealt with. And finally, man, this is better. I like news. And I know people probably say I love news, but I'm going to say this every week, because I love the people at Snowbird Wilderness Outfitters. I said it last week, and Brody Holloway at Snowbird listened to the podcast, and those guys are appreciative. But man, these guys are just the most incredible partners for a local church. And so I said last week, I say it again, if you have students, you have adults in your church, there's nothing you can't partner with Snowbird over. It's a place you can take your people, marriage retreats, men's retreats, women's retreats, but for your students, fall retreats, winter retreats, summer camp. You don't have to unteach anything. You don't have to worry about theological, practical content. These guys prepare well. It's an incredible place to go. Andrews, North Carolina, you're going to get to, unless it's wintertime, possibly you get to raft the Nantahala River. And if you go summer camp, you might be guided by a Jolly. So Gabe or John Mark might be one of your guides. But man, if you're not taking your students to Snowbird, are you even discipling people, man? I just got to wonder.
They do such a good job. Yeah. I mean, like, I remember back summer camps, it was all the fun stuff. And then, like, we had some, like, okay theology stuff. But they do such a good job of, like, we amplify. We have a great time. We do a lot of fun stuff. We've got a lot of cool activities. Yeah. But man, when it's time to get serious and talk about the gospel, we don't back off of that. Yeah. We don't just sing silly songs. They do sing fun songs too, but they sing theologically strong songs. Man. They preach the word, and they don't sugarcoat it or water it down for kids and for youth. And I just think that's rare. I think that's one of the things that makes them just incredible.
Yeah, when you get to worship, you're gonna hear songs that are gonna be rich. And if you're on the bus to the river, you're going to hear silly songs. You're going to, I want my bubblegum, my bazooka, bubblegum.
Right.
If you're on
Which you should. It's camp. You should do those things too.
Like
but
killing the baby seal. Yeah, and if you hadn't heard that, I know it's probably like people are sensitive about killing the baby seal. But there's a killing the baby seal song that's like 7,000 years old they've been propagating. But it's fun, and you're going to
hear the lawsuit paperwork from, what's that animal company being written right now?
Yeah, PETA.
PETA. You guys promote murders of seals.
That's right. But it's absolutely, you can check out their podcast, No Sanity Required. They do a great job on their podcast dealing with contemporary issues for students. And so swooutfitters.com, you can check them out. And you know what it's time for? It's time to shake and bake.
Shake and bake.
Shake and bake. Shake and then bake. Shake and bake. Shake and bake. It's shake and bake time. Shake and bake, buddy. Shake it before you bake it.
Man, I can't hear that without seeing the scenes of the movie. It still makes me laugh. And people wonder, why do you do that? It's like, because it makes me laugh. It's funny. And we're shaking and baking, baby.
That's true.
So we're going to get after. Last week we talked about what do we do with Trump. We're in this cycle. We're in an election cycle, and we're going this year. It's been political heavy because it's an election cycle, and it's a very important time in our history. So we're trying to address those things. And so last week we talked about what do we do with Trump and the 34 guilty charges, 34 felonies. This week we're going to talk about Biden. What do we do with Biden? We're probably going to cover Kennedy because he's getting a great, huge amount of support, and he's going to be a factor one way or the other. So we want to talk about that. And we're going to also talk about other issues on theology. If you're sick of politics, we get it. But it's an important thing, and particularly for Christians to know how to engage, because for so long we have found ourselves co-opted for power by multiple parties, by multiple people, and we find ourselves in this position of either supporting a party or being yanked into something without actually propagating what it is we as Christians value. And it's not being Republican, not being a Democrat, not being an independent, but it's being followers of Jesus Christ. And there is a biblical worldview. And I'm not saying we're perfect at it, but I do think it's a grind to try to apply your faith in the public square to elevate our distinctives and never, ever back off of them. And at the same time, being able to be prophetic to every institution and everything and speak to it. So we spoke about that with Trump, and we've been honest about our views and how we're going to have to approach that, because we don't have an overtly, clearly clean Christian option. And we talked about some of the logic applied to that. So this week we're going to talk about what in the world are we going to do about our current president, Joseph Biden. So Chris, why don't you start us off? Tell us what you think. What do we got to do here, man?
I got to say I'm not going to say what I really want to say about Biden, but it's just, I mean, there's just, there's a lot of things here to unpack. There's things to look at from a Christian point of view. There's things that I look at from like a father and a provider and a husband.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I separate those two at home, but looking at them from different lenses. And, the biggest things lately is, Biden continues to preach this, like his focus is everything is anti-Republican, anti-Trump. And I get that. Both sides do that. But the biggest knocks, I would say, politically against Biden right now, for Christians or for myself, they seem to focus on, number one, the stance on abortion and life, immigration issues, the horrendous shape of the economy since he took office, particularly for the middle class, which I think he's pretty much obliterated, and then the amount of money and resources being sent to Ukraine. So just from political, and Ukraine and Israel, or to other countries. So political stances, I would say those are kind of the big areas. I'm not on board with all those issues and stances, but two of the bigger concerns, I think, and I think you're going to hit on this, so we can come back to it, but are his health concerns combined with the administration continuing to say he's fine. I think one of the things that really frustrates me about this administration is more than any I can remember, is they just continue to blatantly lie about things. And they might use something that has a little bit of truth, particularly about the economy.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's just blatant lying. It's not it's not like warping of truth. It's like, no, that's not true.
Right.
The economy's not in great shape.
Right.
And then his health, they continue to say he's fine. The thing lately, I don't know if you've seen this, is the I forget what her name is, the press secretary.
Yeah, Karine Jean-Pierre.
Yeah, who I think is the worst to ever do that role.
Yeah.
Is that all these videos of him having to be helped off of stage or walked around or turned back around are completely fake news and made up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, we have actual video evidence, like of
haven't
him
been
freezing
doctored.
up. Yeah. I was like, yes, sometimes they're cropped to make it look like something else, but we have the full videos. And so just trying to, like, it's just hard for me. I'm trying to be objective in things and say, well, let me at least, I want to make sure I understand that side. I'm not going to vote for him.
Right.
There's no way I'm going to vote for him. But just even from that side, number one, like, there's no way he's going to make it 4 more years, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm wrong. I don't even know that he's going to make it on the ballot because there's a lot of reports now about him being replaced by another candidate because of his health. And there continues to be more and more concerns internally. And so
absolutely,
that's just my intro from that. There's a laundry list of political issues I can't agree with, but we can cover some of those as we move on. Yeah. I know you'll have a lot on some of those, but just, yeah, what do I do with the fact that this guy is clearly not healthy? He's not healthy mentally. He's not healthy physically. And frankly, how can he be in his 80s after being in the White House for, was that 12 years if you count his vice presidency of 8 years?
Yeah.
And then his history in the Senate. Like, I just don't know how it's possible because of the wear and tear of that job. And some of that goes for Trump too, but he at least seems to be in a much better place.
Yeah. There are lots of things there worthy of time, but the one that, and I get so sick of people criticizing Christians for this and applying our view of life to the abortion issue like we're one-issue voters. And to some degree, many of us, it is a one-issue thing oftentimes. Because what people fail to do is they fail to recognize that humans matter. Yeah. And that we are image bearers of God. As Christians, I'm not going to shy away from that. My worldview tells me that every human from conception past death matters because we don't believe that death is the end. Matter of fact, the Bible affirms that even past death, you are alive. You're in a different place. You're either in Hades awaiting for your resurrection for judgment eternally, or you are with the Lord Jesus Christ in a living state that is as real as this state while your body's in the ground. It's as physical as this physical state even while your body's in the ground, and you will be raised to life to receive eternal salvation on a new heaven and a new earth. That's our worldview. Mm-hmm. We don't shy away from that. I'm not going to pretend like that's not my worldview. And that means that when we take the life of a child, an innocent child, we are applying injustice to a human being. And so I don't care what party you are. If you only mildly support defending life or against it, I'm going to be against them. I don't care if it's Trump, I don't care if it's Kennedy, I don't care if it's Biden. If we are for the extermination of children for convenience, because there's far too many options to not get pregnant.
Right.
And I don't even mean abstaining. I ain't telling you need to abstain. You should. It's good for you to abstain until you get married. But if people don't, there are other options to not get pregnant. And so why should we murder a child because of the irresponsibility of 2 grown people or 2 whoever people? Bottom line is that issue matters. And their ardent, progressive adoption of the execution and extermination of human beings will never be something I'm going to support and I'm going to stand against. And I'm appalled at the people who call themselves Christians who will vote for that for some government handout. I'm about to get fired up like I did last week. But you said it, and it's important. And those things we have to critique about him because I'll say this in a few minutes, but he is either that. I think his position over the years has evolved to this position that he currently has. I don't think he was as ardently this way early on in his career, but he definitely has gotten there, or his strings are being pulled because he can't intellectually be there like he used to be, and the far left progressives are ruling him.
And the same is true for his stance on LGBTQ and gender issues, because he was very vehemently against those things in the past. Yeah. And so I think that leads me to another. We talked about, well, I can't vote for Trump because character matters. And I'm like, Well, if we're going to talk about character, certainly there's not like this proof that he's a great high character, and the fact that there is so much hypocrisy that comes from both him and the party. And I'm glad we brought up life, because this is where I think there's two major instances of hypocrisy here, right? It's where women should have the right to choose. We vote for we will support women's rights and we support women's choices. Well, you didn't with Laken Riley, because here's a man that came into the country illegally, brutally murdered this young girl, and now we're trying to fight for his rights and what rights he has. That's one, and I don't want to go in detail with that. I think most people understand that.
Right.
Then you also have the fact that, well, again, we're big on women's rights. Oh, but it's okay for biological males to compete in women's sports, and we're going to support that, because if they feel like they're a man or a woman, they should be able to compete in women's sports. I can't think of anything worse against women's rights than that. And then, not to mention the whole thing with the vaccinations, right? It's like, my body, my choice. Well, except for this, you have to take this, or you don't care about other people. In fact, you're part of murdering and people dying if you don't support this. So we're going to mandate, we're going to try to force this upon everybody. And so again, it's like you can't have both. Yeah. But they're trying to.
And their failure to recognize that there's a fundamental difference between requiring a mandate or requiring a person to carry a baby to term. This is apples and oranges. We're not talking about those are two completely separate issues, but they want to play them as the same. And I think Christians they let themselves get sucked into that intellectual black hole of believing those are the same things and find themselves at odds. And you don't have to be at odds. Requiring a human being to not murder another human being is not the same as saying, don't give me that shot. These are two very, very different things, but they want to make it the same argument, my body, my choice. It's really not my body, my choice. That baby you're murdering is not your body. It's their body. And if you don't see them as created in the image of God from conception all the way through into eternity, then you have that person, whoever they happen to be, they're just wrong. My worldview says they are wrong.
And half of those babies are female, so what about their health?
And the majority of them are minorities too. So you're talking 100%. You're talking about Planned Parenthood, Margaret Sanger, and the intentional extermination of minorities. And now we fund that with our tax dollars. So anyway, you're right. Those are issues when we deal with Biden we can't ignore. It's not just like he's for women. No, he's not. He's for a progressive agenda that has a dark issues, and dark kingdom agenda sitting behind it. And I'm not saying Republicans are innocent either. I'm not pro-Democrat or pro-Republican. I'm pro-kingdom of God. And so what we want to do is be able to speak prophetically as Christians to all parties.
Right.
Regardless of it. Because here's the deal, the libertarians are just pro-weed. I mean, every stinking dumb libertarian that gets put up in front of me, they end up bringing it up. We're just for weed. I'm like, oh, God. Can you do something different than the legalization of marijuana? Whether that is or isn't, shouldn't be an issue. It's like that's the one thing they run on.
Most
like,
people
you're all just
don't
potheads.
care about that.
No, they don't care about that. Does it create mass incarceration issues? It's a taxation issue, which, by the way, the prison system is a privately held for-profit business. That's a problem. We probably need to talk about that at some point. But nonetheless, we want to speak to all parties because I'm not going to be co-opted by any of them, including Trump.
Right.
Even if I vote for him, I'm not going to be co-opted by his worldview.
And speaking of worldviews, even Biden's using that. It's like, with Trump trying to sell all these Bibles. And I read something the other day that like the more religious choice is Biden because he grew up Catholic. And I'm like, it's just like, I don't have words because I just legitimately don't have words for that.
They won't even let him take the supper. Like the Catholic Church is like, no, because of your stance on abortion, they keep him from the table.
Right.
Good for them.
Okay, because your family were Catholics, so now you're the more religious choice, so Christians should vote for you. and
right.
And again, we talked about the Trump side last week that Christians shouldn't be saying that he's some Christian savior or representative either. And I certainly don't support the selling of Bibles with the Constitution in the front as like this America equals book of God's word. Yeah. So and that's a separate issue, but it's just we've talked about this.
Yeah.
The left's just trying to champion minorities, trying to champion the LGBTQ community only for their own good, not for the good of those people.
100%.
Saw in California, they're taking down U-turn signs in certain neighborhoods because the original purpose of those was for people who were homophobic and were trying to stop gay people from meeting with each other. And I'm like, okay, not a big deal, but I'm like, but again, we're taking down U-turn signs that may have been there for the wrong reason, but now are there legitimately for traffic reasons.
I didn't know. I mean, I saw that and I was like, how is that a homosexual issue? And that's really, I didn't read the article. That's legitimately what.
It was legitimately because they were put in place to keep gays from being with one another or being able to go and connect with each other. They couldn't U-turn to get to wherever. I don't know all of the history behind it, but that was the bigger headline was why they were removing them.
Okay.
And I'm like, okay, well, fine, but like it's also probably unsafe to make U-turns there.
Right. And how about bigger issues?
Right.
Bigger issues. How about Gavin Newsom do something to actually as a governor to help his state when people are fleeing California because of how bad it is? Taking down U-turn signs is probably not high on your list of things to deal with.
We had this little bit of this conversation yesterday, but the story of this I think it's like a 6'4" large man who was raping women got convicted of rape, and his attorney's trying to make it so that he can go to an all-female prison because he reportedly identifies as female. And while just hearing that, most of you are probably cringing, like, "Oh, that will never happen."
It's happening.
It's happening. Like I don't know if that what case is happening. I don't know if he's getting that or if they're doing that, but that has happened.
Yeah, the judge in that case was being sent. The judge was a lady being deposed. Is the right word, by the Senate. It was Ted Cruz who was interviewing that judge and asking that judge some questions, and it was very uncomfortable for the judge because the logic is clear, uncovering the far left progressive agenda. And the judge recognized what was happening and tried to avoid the question, but you can't avoid the questions because the answers are obvious.
Yeah.
But that's what Biden is representing, or whoever's pulling his strings.
Right. And unfortunately, whether or not it's him, he represents that and he's in support of it.
Yeah.
At least publicly. Another issue lately is there's been a lot of trans individuals who have committed crimes, whether it's school shootings or violent crimes, who are getting off on mental instability. But my problem is for when we say that that's a mental issue and they're not, like, they're still biologically who they were created to be. Yeah, that's like we're transphobic. Like we hate them. Yeah. Like we're causing them to make these bad decisions and do these horrible things. But then you're going around saying, well, now it's a mental issue, so let's not put them in real prison. Let's put them in a psych ward because the only reason that they committed these crimes was because of people who don't agree with them. Right. And, like, that's got to stop.
Got to stop.
Like, they made a choice to do a horrible crime, we've got to stop saying it's because of this. Yeah. Well, that's not really the case.
That's right. And this is the progressive wing of the Democrat Party who is coming in behind and making sure the FBI, who, by the way, oh God, there's so many issues. The FBI is not far off of becoming a law enforcement tool of a progressive agenda. There's enough evidence to show that they're keeping, like, the manifesto of the trans person who shot up the school in Nashville, the Christian school. They don't want that to go online. Man, as soon as somebody else who's straight or whatever does something, man, they put their manifesto out on the internet. This girl who identifies in all this way, man, they have kept that stuff quiet because it's a hate crime against Christians. But that's okay. But this is the progressive wing of the Democrat Party, of which Biden is the head and representative of, that people are eager to vote for. Blows my absolute mind. And people who call themselves Christians will vote for that. That's unacceptable.
And I'm curious, like, if Trump was not running on the Republican side, would Biden still even be the candidate? My argument's probably not. Yeah. I would say they would have removed him. Yeah. But they feel like he's the only way that, and this is why they pushed him before, was that the only way that we can defeat Trump is by using someone who is connected to a popular president.
Yeah.
And who stands on the exact opposite things that he does.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. And it's intentionally playing the wings of the party against one another.
And then the Republican Party is guilty too.
Sure.
The only reason we're
100%.
pushing Trump is because none of those other candidates were going to get anywhere near the votes. Yeah. None of them were beating Biden.
Yeah. There's actually a political theory, and I've said this on the podcast before. It is kind of the theory, if you could put a physical shape to it, it's kind of shaped like a horseshoe. The farther you get away from the middle, right over here, and the farther out you go to the wings, the closer they get tactically to one another.
Right.
So meaning like they may be ideologically completely opposite, but tactically their efforts are the same.
Yeah.
So the far right of the Republican, the far left of the Democrat Party tactically do the exact same things. They just have different ideologies. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we as Christians have to be able to identify stuff like that. Get in the weeds and recognize that nuts over here and nuts over here are just doing the same things with different ideologies, pushing them. Right. There's no sense of the common good for humans under a constitutional republic, which, by the way, is even a debate. Are we a democracy or a constitutional republic? And I don't believe we're not a pure democracy. The majority does not rule in the United States of America. We have far too many. It's a constitutional republic that keeps the majority from ruling. That's actually part of the point, is that the minority has a voice, and there's a possibility of the minority getting their way based on the way our system's set up. I know people want to. I'm willing to fight about that. We are not a pure democracy, nor should we be.
Right.
Because then it's just majority rules. Well, then what about the minority? That brings up issues like the Civil War, we could get into the weeds of that. But you got to continue on. But these things matter, and it matters as Christians that we can unpack them. And by the way, we don't have to throw Bible verses on top of our conclusions. I want Christians to stop feeling like they need a Bible verse to justify saying true things. That makes sense?
Right.
Like if we make a true statement, I don't need to have to find a Bible verse that jives with that true statement. Like if we say we shouldn't vote for far left progressive agenda ideology, I don't need to find a verse that says thou shalt not vote for progressive ideology. Does that make sense?
Yes.
That's not what the Bible's there for. The Bible's there to teach us who God is, who we are, what salvation is, what the kingdom of God is, what a disciple is, what creation's for, and what its end is. All these beautiful things the Bible unpacks. And its end is the glory of Jesus Christ among all nations through the people, the elect of God, beginning with Abraham, going to all nations, a people made up of every tribe, tongue, nation, and language, and the restoration of all things. And so those principles are to be applied to our world, what is good for human beings and for the salvation of the world and the restoration of all things. And so I don't need a Bible verse to tell me specifically what to do with the far left progressive ideology. What I do need to do is apply the application of the whole Bible to the whole world and make good decisions. And I don't need a Bible verse to justify that. And so I think that's one of the things, man, Christians are struggling with. It's like, well, it's just, man, I can't justify that. Man, yeah, you can. 100% you can. And it's the application of critical thinking from a Christian worldview to our situation. And when you do that, choices get a little clearer.
Well, and I think the one of the things the left is doing strongly is doing that against Christians. It's like, look, Jesus is love. They leave out the part that love doesn't equal tolerance.
Yeah.
But in their eyes, they're like, well, Jesus loved everybody and God loves everybody. That's the main reason that the Methodist Church is where they're at. Yeah. It's like I saw a video of a Methodist preacher the other day. This lady was talking about like, it was just a guidebook. Like, and if this guidebook doesn't produce love, then just throw it out. And I'm changing the words, but that was basically her message. And I'm like, people are sitting in this congregation like agreeing with her.
Yeah. Like
she basically just said like, Bible is a good book to live by with some guided rules. Okay, I can live with that if that was a statement itself. Yeah. But then when you say, well, if it does, but if it doesn't work or if it doesn't line up with love, then, it's wrong, basically.
Yeah. And love for them equals not boundaries. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, so that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life, is a boundary, meaning there is no eternal life apart from this means, and God says that is love. In other words, love has boundaries. meaning that I shouldn't love everything, meaning I shouldn't tolerate everything. And to not tolerate is to actually love, because there's some things that will kill you. And if I tolerate it, I'm not loving you if it kills you. But that's not the definition of love they want to deal with. But that's the far left agenda. Is to redefine terms, desensitize, jam, and convert. They want to throw it in your face, jam it in your face, get you desensitized to it, then convert you to their definitions and their ideology. And so we've got to be careful with that. They're running a playbook. This isn't just backyard football. This is organized sports.
Everything is strategic.
It's strategic, 100%. Yep. Okay.
You got some good stuff. Let's dive into that.
3 things I want to share. Number 1, these are questions I have. Is President Biden mentally and physically fit to execute the office of President of the United States? That's the question that's kind of hanging out there, because he has been medically analyzed and the report is out. But what's interesting is that report is being withheld. And there have been contents of that report leaked and people speaking about it, that the conclusion is he is not fit. He is not mentally and physically capable of executing the office of the President of the United States. And so what's interesting is, in my observation, like my mother passed away from a stroke, but the stroke was a result of dementia and Alzheimer's. And so all those things were factoring in there. So we watched her degrade over the years. And what I see in President Biden are the same things I saw in my mom. There are moments of lucidity. Mm-hmm. And there are moments where she was completely herself. And you could watch it happen, like in the room, where she would go from lucid into that state of Alzheimer's and be somewhere else. And the doctors would tell us, like, a person struggling with that disease, that horrible disease, is 1 minute they're in the present moment, and the next minute they're in 1963 climbing some stairs. Which is why if they're not climbing stairs where they are, but in their mind they're climbing stairs, they fall and hurt themselves. And so it's a horrible, devastating disease. And you watch a person mentally decline, and it's devastating. And so what I see and when I observe him is a person who has moments of lucidity, followed very quickly by moments of mental decline. And so, and I say this like with empathy. It's not fair to him. It's not fair to his wife. It's not fair to his children to watch him degrade like that for some political agenda. I think it's horrible. You're talking about a pro-life issue? That man's well-being is more important than a progressive agenda. Right. And he needs to be cared for and loved and protected and honored, not continually pushed out for the constant critique that's following him. And that's why I want to be careful. Like, I want to not critique the man. I want to critique the agenda that I think he's pushing, or people are pushing on him because he's not lucid. But that man deserves honor and respect because he's a human being, number one. And he has served our country a long time. Mm-hmm. And he is the President of the United States. And so there's a degree of authority God has placed on him. And if he is not well, to continue to push him out there to be dishonored by people and made fun of is absolutely horrible. And his protection should be primary. And I don't think they're protecting him. I don't think he's physically fit to execute the office. And I want to say to Christians, don't make fun and don't use it as a means to slam the man. Use it as an opportunity to say, hey, that man deserves some protection and honor. I don't like his policies. I don't like the agenda that's being pushed. But I don't think he's fit, and I think he's being abused.
I agree 100%. It is evident. And again, it comes down to when they're not only not protecting him, but they're continuing to run him out there. And I'm like, well, if he's this way now, and you can see it just when he talks, like he can't even say complete sentences sometimes.
It's sad. What makes you wonder when he is lucid, is it a moment of lucidity or how are they getting him lucid? Because there are moments where, like the State of the Union, you have not heard that man speak that clearly in years, and he was able to rattle it off for an hour. You're like, how? And I'm not going to, I know I'm insinuating some things when I say that, and I don't even want to say it out loud, but how are they getting him to those moments? And then at other times, leaving him to look like he's absolutely floundering. Is that the function of the degrading, or is that them medically helping him? I don't know. But it's a sad thing.
I think it's fair to question it. Yeah. I think we have to be cautious that we're not assuming things and not claiming things that we don't know are true, and I think you're not doing that, but I think that's happening.
Yeah,
out there.
You
but
wonder.
right, it's fair to question it of our leader, though.
Yeah,
it's fair to call that to question because there's enough evidence.
Yeah,
and there's even more fair to question if he's like that now. Years 5, 6, 7, and 8.
Yeah,
like that's scary.
It is scary. It is very scary. My second thing I want to bring up is what happens, because I know we're in an election cycle and the election happens in November, but the Democrat Party, there's a lot of news that comes out of the possible replacement at the convention of a new candidate to run for president and what that's going to look like, or even the possibility of the 25th Amendment being invoked. And so if people are not sure what the 25th Amendment is, it's how you would replace a president while he's in office. So I'm going to just quick rundown where this came from, history behind it. Article 2, Section 1, Clause 6 of the Constitution is known as the Presidential Succession Clause. It states that the VP, Vice President, will assume the duties of the President in case the removal of the President from office of his death, resignation, or inability to discharge the powers and duties of said office. Now, Vice President John Tyler first invoked this clause after the death of William Henry Harrison in 1843. Tyler declared that he was the new president, but Congress debated whether or not this assertion was correct. So the presidential succession clause didn't explicitly state whether the vice president assumes the title of president or whether they simply take on the duties and powers of the presidential position. So this clause also then didn't name a successor to fill the VP office. And then it brought into question what exactly is an inability to discharge the powers and duties. So lots of questions. And who decided whether the president suffered from such an inability? And then can a president reassume their role if they regain this ability, or are they just out for the term? Mm-hmm. So following the assassination of John F. Kennedy in 1963, Indiana Senator Birch Bay sought to answer those questions from that presidential succession of John Tyler in 1843. With a new amendment. So in 1967, the 25th Amendment was ratified for that purpose. And so I'm not going to give you the 25th Amendment because the wording is kind of complicated, but I want to give you its interpretation. So Section 1 of the 25th Amendment confirms the precedent that was set by John Tyler. So if the president is removed from office, dies, or resigns, the VP assumes the position. Before the amendment's ratification, though, a vacant vice president seat would remain unfilled until the next election. But Section 2 changed this rule, stating that the president nominates a replacement VP to fill the position. Then Section 3 of the 25th Amendment states that the president must formally notify the Speaker of the House and the president pro tempore, which is the highest ranking senator of the majority party of the Senate, who are respectively second and third in line for the presidency after the vice president, if they are temporarily unable to uphold the powers and duties of the president. The vice president then becomes the acting president until the president issues a formal notice of their return to capacity. And then Section 4 establishes the procedures for naming an acting president when the president is deemed unable to perform their constitutional duties but refuses to leave office. All right, so by following there, first the VP and the majority of the cabinet determine the competency of the president, and if the president's ruled incompetent, the VP immediately takes charge. The president can then declare themselves able, and the vice president and cabinet have 4 days to agree or disagree. Now, if the group agrees, the president resumes their duties. Otherwise, the VP keeps office and Congress votes on the president's ability. And a 2/3 majority vote is needed to remove the president from office and replace them with the vice president. And so that's fairly complicated. I don't want to spend time unpacking that because that's a lot. But my point is there is a process to remove a president. And the question that's floating is, will the Democratic Party seek to invoke the 25th Amendment, which would, if all that process worked out, was ratified by a 2/3 vote in Congress, that would make Kamala Harris the president.
Yikes.
And that I'm not sure what's worse. Biden and his state, or Kamala Harris and just her capacity. Neither one of those are good options as far as I'm concerned.
No, and granted, she would only have it till the election. Like she doesn't necessarily become the Democratic candidate for the next presidency, and I don't think there's any way that they would appoint her that.
Yeah.
But
word that keeps leaking out that I hear from people in various outlets that I trust is that she is interested in getting back to California and running for governor And there are actually ads placed by Gavin Newsom in California in the state of Alabama. Amy Jocelyn sent me a Twitter of an ad in the state of Alabama on an abortion issue that Gavin Newsom's campaign paid for, which is pretty interesting to me. Like, why would Gavin Newsom's campaign, or why would his people run an ad in Alabama on the abortion issue and the IVF issue particularly, unless they're floating the popularity of Gavin Newsom to replace Biden at the DNC, at the convention, which does not require a 25th Amendment. It's just like the DNC is not going to put him forward for candidate.
Right.
Which is, in my opinion, that's the more likely scenario, is that the DNC, Biden is replaced with either Newsom, Michelle Obama, or Hillary Clinton.
But remains president to the end of his term. That's
right.
I don't think that they would invoke the 25th Amendment unless there's like some kind of public or big medical issue that they just can't hide anymore.
Yeah.
I think they're trying to drain him dry to the end of the term.
Yeah, or the military issue of the exercises. Like, if people are watching various news sources, Russia and China are exercising joint military operations in Cuba and like just off the Florida coast. I mean, submarines, destroyers. China is actively building deep water ports in South America. It's just an interesting time. And so since the Cuban Missile Crisis, we have nukes parked close to Russia, which is why that whole issue of Ukraine is a powder keg. You've got Russia combating that by doing exercises just off the Florida coast in international waters with nuclear capability, using Cuba as a base. I mean, that smells, again, Cuban Missile Crisis. And so if you've got a president that cannot respond to that, somebody is.
Yeah.
And so it's an interesting time. And then we are trying to deal with Taiwan, where China just absolutely has hypersonic capacity as far as nuclear and conventional warfare. They have hypersonic capacity that we don't have a defense for. So the truth of the matter is there's no way we could really truthfully defend Taiwan. And we're dependent on Taiwan for microchip manufacturing. And so those are issues that are sitting there, and you've got, is Biden capable in this elevated, tense moment of ruling? And so I'm with you. I don't think they're going to try to invoke the 25th Amendment. But what happens if the Soviets decide to just creep on up into U.S. waters just to see what we'll do, which is not uncommon.
Right. And I think that they are much more likely to do that with the current president than they would if Trump was in charge, because nobody did anything when he was there.
Yeah, that's right.
Because whether they were just afraid that he was crazy enough to do something, or is because the authority that he was giving off globally was more intimidating. Yeah. Whatever the reason.
And I would just confess straight up, as an Army dad, I have a vested interest in not wanting to bury a second lieutenant. I don't want to be a Gold Star dad.
Yeah.
For a failure of leadership on the international stage, to push some progressive agenda. I mean, if we're legitimately defending good and right things, like, I don't want to be a Gold Star dad ever. And for those who've had to bury their children, like, I follow the Rangers. I follow the Berets, and particularly because it's Army, and those parents who from Iraq, Afghanistan, and even training, who buried their sons. It's hard for me to say that without feeling that rise of emotion.
Sure.
But when it comes to having blood in that game, man, I take that seriously, and I want that commander-in-chief to make good decisions that, if necessary, the sacrifice can be said to be worth it, not because those young officers were pawns. So, yeah. So I guess the final thing I would bring up is, how should Christians think about our current situation? And I've got a few thoughts. Number one, I'd say sympathy for a human being struggling with end-of-life issues. We need to take no pleasure in Biden's physical and mental demise. Like that, there should be no celebrating that. It's horrible. And I just even wonder what Dr. Jill Biden, what she thinks. And like, she has kept a graceful stance, and I would be curious to know what her actual thoughts are. But we should take no pleasure in the demise of someone we don't agree with. So number two, then I think flat out rejection of the progressives that run that party and their insinuation of that the evidence of his demise is faked. Now we got to reject that. I don't know if anybody, if you ever read 1984 by George Orwell.
I'm aware of it, but I never read it.
It's so prophetic. I'm like, how did this cat do this? It's worth a peruse. I used to make my students read it in my worldview course. But this was a statement from George Orwell. It said, the party that told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears, it was their final, most essential command. I'm like, whoa. And that's exactly what's happening. Oh, this isn't real. What you're seeing, that didn't happen. And so we got to reject that narrative. Third, we need to oppose an agenda that takes advantage of a man to propagate their changing of values for everybody, using, among many things, a narrative that the puppet they're using is well and capable. And finally, I would just say we got to call out the lies. Again, kind of repeating myself a little bit, but if Biden was okay, if he was okay, and that clip where they were on stage with President Obama, President Obama would not have been inclined to grab his arm and guide him off if he was okay. Right. But because President Obama knows, and whether he was instructed to do this because President Biden needed the help, or whether he did it because his own knowledge of his situation was there, he did it because it was needed. Right? So Obama wouldn't have done that had he, number one, not known and just wanted to take care of his friend, or was instructed to do it because his friend needed to be taken care of. That's not been doctored. That was just done. And so my point in that is to say that all this stuff is fake when President Obama's care for his friend was evident, it lets us know that it was needed. Right. And the fact that it's needed and they're telling us it's not needed is playing the George Orwell game with us. No, what you saw is not real. Mm-hmm. And so it's just like that Orwell had that nailed is just as it's like, hey, eerie, but that's happening in our lifetime feels a little bit surreal. And so that's my stuff. I need to be quiet. You got some Hayes takeaways. Why don't you hit us with them? Yeah,
let's do it. Number one, and you hit on this, we should pray for Biden and his administration. Pray for salvation. Pray for health. We don't have to vote for him, but we definitely shouldn't be hoping or praying for his destruction or ruin. Pray for his heart to be changed and those who support these issues. Number two, know your negotiables and your non-negotiables. These are terms you often hear in marital counseling or when you're dating and thinking about getting engaged. But however, it's important when deciding who to vote for. Decide where you stand and which issues you can deal with if a candidate supports, and which issues you can never under any circumstances support, which that will help guide you. But do that under a biblical worldview, not a worldly perspective.
That's good.
Number three, use debates and discussions to speak truth, but to speak truth in love towards others who think differently than you. Read the word, know it, use it to guide everything, but also listen to others and let them share what they believe and why. And then my final one today, I just come back to this when there's a lot of this uncertainty or a lot of these issues out there and trying to think through it. It's just Philippians 4, 8 and 9. And I know we've all heard this, but I just think these words fit. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence, if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. What you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things, and the God of peace will be with you.
Awesome. Good stuff, man. Hey, guys, we appreciate you listening to Theology in the Dirt. We hope that you enjoy going on this journey with us of trying to practice our theology in the public square of our homes, our city, and our world. We're not trying to isolate ourselves to a Christian subculture, but we're trying to practice our faith in the public square so that we can be salt and light that Jesus told us to be. So if you have a question you'd like us to talk about, send it to theologyinthedirt@gmail.com. If you have any questions, you can send those there as well. We'd love it if you'd share the podcast, give us a 5-star rating, comment on it, share it, social media, all that stuff, if it's at all helpful. And we appreciate it. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you next time. Out.